They didn't scream, they didn't fight, and the door was still locked from the inside. A young couple murdered without warning. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Helena Monroe is brought in to find what everyone else missed. Because this wasn't random. Someone was waiting.
One Ordinary Night, Chapter 1, A Quiet Call. The call came just after 6 a.m., before Helena had even poured her coffee. The kettle hadn't finished its soft hiss. Dawn was a dull, grey band along the window. "Monroe? Sorry, it's early." Detective Ruiz sounded more tired than apologetic, the kind of voice that had already rehearsed 3 explanations and didn't like any of them. "I'm listening," Helena said, already reaching for a pen she didn't need to look for. The notepad opened to a clean page by muscle memory alone. Double homicide, young couple, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. Looks like they let the person in. She paused, pen hovering. "So you think they knew them?" "We're not sure. It's clean. Almost too clean." A rustle of paper, a sigh off mic. Reyes and Tran, late 20s, 3rd floor unit on Walcott, nurse and software developer, quiet life, no priors, nothing obvious. Helena already knew she'd say yes. "You want me to look at the interviews?" "Not just that. We need you at the scene. There's something about it. Can't put my finger on it, but you've got that thing." That thing. No one ever named it. They talked around it, instincts, a read of a room, luck. Helena let the silence hold a beat. "I'll be there in 40. The building was a squat red brick walk-up tucked behind a grocery store with a dented dumpster and a flickering security light. It looked like the kind of place you passed without noticing, an address meant to be background, which is probably what the killer counted on. Ruiz waited by the front door, hair damp, dark suit already rumpled and shining at the elbows. The hallways smelled faintly of old carpet cleaner and last night's dinners. "We're clearing the bodies soon," he said as they signed the log. "Figured you'd want to look before the coroner takes them." The apartment was quiet, not in the way of silence, but in the way of aftermath, a stillness after something final, like the air itself had decided to stand very still and not be noticed. Leah Tran lay in the kitchen doorway, one hand outstretched as if reaching for something she'd already decided to put back. Daniel Reyes was closer to the living room, slumped against the arm of the couch. No defensive wounds, no blood spatter beyond the fatal points. The violence had been precise and then politely put away. Helena moved slowly, eyes working left to right, top to bottom. The broken ceramic mug under the table, hairline fractures spidering through the glaze, one of Leah's shoes off by the door, at an angle that said she hadn't meant to leave it, a faint crescent scrape near the keyhole where metal had kissed metal recently. "You said there was no sign of forced entry?" she asked without looking up. Ruiz nodded. "None. Door was locked when officers arrived. No damage, no prints that don't belong, just normal." He grimaced. "Too normal." "What about neighbors?" "Working through interviews. So far, nothing. Everyone says they were quiet, polite, kept to themselves." He flipped a page. "No noise complaints, packages delivered, the usual." She crouched near Daniel, registering the small things, the way his shoulders hadn't bunched, how his jaw wasn't clenched. Calm. head turned slightly toward the doorway, not tense. They weren't alarmed. He was seated, she was in motion, maybe going to him, maybe walking away, but there's no panic, no fight. Ruiz nodded. So we're back to they let someone in. Or someone had a key, Helena murmured, almost to herself. Ruiz blinked. You think it was someone with access? Could be. Someone who came in quietly, someone they didn't expect to see or didn't see at all. He rubbed the back of his neck. We'll need a list. Family, friends, landlord, maintenance, neighbors, anyone who could have gotten a copy. Helena stood, eyes scanning the entryway table, the coat hooks, the neat row of grocery bags folded into triangles. Start there, then we talk to the people who knew them. You think we'll see it in their faces? If they knew who did this. Helena glanced once more at Leah's hand, still stretched out toward nothing. She turned toward the living room. There was something about the space, the clean lines, the sense of order. It didn't feel lived in long enough to collect real secrets, but something about it pressed at the edges, a pressure like a headache arriving. What else do I need to know? Ruiz hesitated, thumb worrying at the corner of his notebook. One weird thing. A neighbor across the hall said she didn't hear a thing all night. She always hears everything. TV, arguments, even the blender. But last night, nothing. Helena looked around again, slower, letting her gaze rest on corners, thresholds, the underplaces where dust decides to stay. Sometimes it wasn't what was there. Sometimes it was what wasn't. Chapter 2. Familiar Faces. Helena preferred to do the interviews herself. No recordings, no mirrored glass, just people sitting across from her, trying very hard to act like themselves and never quite succeeding. The trick was to notice what their bodies told on them when their voices were careful. Daniel's boss met her in the office break room, a stale coffee cave with a humming soda machine and a bulletin board of outdated wellness tips. He was pale and fidgeting, fingers smoothing a napkin to tissue strands. He was solid, the man said. Quiet, low drama, didn't miss deadlines, didn't gossip. That's all I got. Did he have friends here? Helena asked, casual. A shrug that dodged eye contact. A couple lunch people, no one close. He was the kind who said good morning, smiled, and went back to his screen. She made a note she wouldn't need later. Any tension recently? Arguments? Layoffs? Anything unusual? Not a thing. At the hospital, fluorescent lights bleached the hours to sameness. Leah's co-workers offered more warmth, but not much else. She was sweet, one nurse said, eyes glossy. Night shifts will kill you. Did she ever mention anyone bothering her, at work or otherwise? Helena asked. The charge nurse frowned, thinking carefully, choosing words she wouldn't need to take back. There was one guy, patient's husband, who made her uncomfortable, called the desk after hours. We flagged it. Name? She checked the system. Paul Kenzie, but he hasn't been in since March. It was something. Helena passed it to Ruiz with a text and a dot that meant urgent-ish. By late afternoon, she sat with the families, Leah's parents in a living room that smelled faintly of lemon balm and old books, Daniel's sister at a kitchen table nicked by years, and let them talk until the silences meant more than the stories. She was the cautious one, Leah's mother said, folding and unfolding her hands, the rhythm of a prayer. Double-checked the stove, kept a bat by the door, always locked up. Daniel's sister leaned forward,
elbows on wood. They were happy, maybe too happy. Sometimes I wondered if they were pretending, like really trying. Pretending how? Helena asked, neutral. A shrug that dodged eye contact. Little things. He stopped talking about his job. She changed her hair, even though she hated short hair. They were adjusting to something, or hiding something. Helena let the comment sit. Grief warped perception. It also rubbed the varnish off the past. Both could be useful. Back at the precinct, as dusk settled purple beyond the blinds, Ruiz handed her a coffee and a look. Everyone's got something to say, nothing that leads anywhere. We're running Kenzie, but nothing jumps yet. No signs of forced entry? Still think they knew the person. Ruiz nodded, or trusted them, or didn't see them as a threat. She gestured toward the whiteboard, names, arrows, a floor plan sketched fast. Did anyone narrow down the key angle? Landlord says the super has one, he has one, and a spare was in the lockbox, which hasn't been opened. Super's alibi checks out. Did Leah or Daniel give anyone a copy? Neighbor to water plants, family for emergencies, that kind of thing.
Ruiz flipped his notes. Daniel's sister says no, but Leah mentioned an older man across the hall, friendly, helped with groceries. He might have had a key. We're following up. Helena stood, thinking of the entryway shelf, the shoes aligned heel to heel. Start there, she said. Then we talk to the people who knew them. You think we'll see it in their faces? If they knew who did this, Helena's mouth tightened. Eventually. She turned toward the window, the city humming its indifferent song. There was something about the space, clean lines, order, a life that looked like a staged photo. It didn't feel lived in long enough to carry deep secrets, and yet something pressed from the periphery, an outline of an absence. What else do I need to know? Ruiz hesitated. One weird thing. Neighbor across the hall says she didn't hear a thing all night. She always hears everything. TV, arguments, the blender. But last night, nothing. Helena let the hum of the vending machine fill the pause.
Chapter 3. Who else had a key? Paul Kenzie didn't open the door right away. A chain slid, the pause of a man measuring how much of himself to show. When he did, his face was pale and drawn, like someone already halfway through a bad dream he couldn't fully remember. I heard, he said before introductions, that nurse, Leah, she was kind. He stepped back, letting Helena and Ruiz into a narrow townhouse entryway crowded with old magazines and a leaning coat tree. A TV murmured from the next room, sports highlights undercut by a persistent commercial jingle. She mentioned you had made her uncomfortable, Helena said, voice level. His jaw twitched. That's what they said. That's what was reported. I called twice, once to ask about my wife's file, once to say thank you. He swallowed, a hard knot. I didn't know that wasn't allowed. Helena watched the micro tells, flush high on the cheekbones, darting eyes that still landed when asked something direct, fingers worrying the hem of his sleeve. Nervous, yes. Evasive, no. Where were you Monday night? Ruiz asked. Home, watching the Oilers lose by 3. Alone? He nodded. I don't have company. 15 minutes later, they left with nothing to hold him on. No priors, no threats, no gaps in his timeline. A man that made people uneasy, without seeming dangerous. Outside, early fall light made everything look cold. Ruiz rubbed his eyes. He's strange, but he's not our guy. Helena didn't argue. Sometimes the quietest part of her agreed before her mind did. Sometimes agreement sounded like a door not quite closing. Back at the building, the neighbor Ruiz had mentioned, Mr. Halverson, met them in the hall before they knocked. A thin, kindly face, sweater with patched elbows, the careful gait of someone who counted their steps. "Sorry about all this," he said, voice rough but warm. "Leah and Daniel were good kids, always said hello, helped me when I locked myself out." "Did you know them well?" Helena asked. "Well enough. I'm retired, mostly home. We talked sometimes. They kept the place tidy." She laughed with her whole face. "Did you ever have a key to their unit?" He scratched his chin, eyes drifting to a hook by his own door. "Yes, actually, for a while. They were out of town last winter. I checked in, fed the fish, took in packages." "Do you still have it?" A pause that tightened his mouth. "I returned it. Pretty sure I did. At least, I thought I did." Ruiz glanced at Helena. "Mind if we take a quick look, just to confirm?" Halverson waved them in. His apartment was cramped but neat, filled with books, a philodendron thriving on a high shelf, faded, framed photos that smiled from a different decade. He opened a drawer in the sideboard and rummaged, then the kitchen junk drawer, then the bowl by the coat rack. "I had it on a blue tag, always on this hook. I swear I gave it back." Helena watched him, not because she suspected him, but because she could see him suspecting his memory, the way shame made people smaller. "Anyone else been in your apartment recently?" He looked up, sheepish. "Yes, I have someone who helps me out, once a week. Groceries, laundry, that sort of thing." "A family member?" "No, a kid from the neighborhood, Kelvin. Nice enough, bit distracted, but never gave me trouble." "Would he have had access to the drawer?" "I guess so. If he went looking for something, I don't know why he would." Ruiz took notes. "Last name, contact info?" Halverson wrote it down with a hand that trembled at the edges. In the hallway afterwards, Helena leaned against the wall, feeling the cool paint through her jacket. If someone found that key and used it, it could explain a lot, Ruiz finished. Still, it doesn't give us motive, but it cracks the access problem. Helena crossed her arms. Or it's just a key that fell behind a couch and we're chasing shadows. Ruiz looked back at Halverson's door, his mouth a straight line. "Still, we find this Kelvin, we ask some questions." They started down the hall. Helena's eyes drifted to Daniel and Leah's door, not because of what had happened, blood learned to fade from a scene, but because of how easily it had been allowed to happen. A plain door in a plain hall, and someone had known exactly how to open it. The building hummed the soft noises of other lives, the distant water pipes, a radio 2 floors down, footsteps above, and yet under it she felt the echo of the neighbor's report, a night without ordinary sounds, a floor holding its breath.
Chapter 4. Things that don't fit. Kelvin was 19, polite in the way of someone raised to say ma'am, and vaguely annoyed at being pulled out of class for something he hadn't done.
He kept shifting his backpack higher on his shoulder, like it might walk off without him. "I didn't steal anything," he said for the third time. "Mr. Holverson is cool. He's like the only neighbor who knows my name." They sat in a quiet corner of a community center near his college campus, a room with scuffed linoleum and a rack of folded chairs that smelled faintly of dust and lemon cleaner. Ruiz flipped through notes while Helena watched the way Kelvin's foot bounced beneath the table, an anxious metronome that sped up whenever a question landed too close. "Do you remember seeing a key in his apartment?" she asked. Her tone was even, unhurried, the kind of voice that made people hear themselves. Kelvin frowned. "He's got like 50 keys. It's an old guy key situation. Hooks and jars and bowls. I don't know what any of them open." "Did you ever take one?" "No." "Did you ever bring anyone with you when you went over?" He shook his head. "It's not a hangout. I help him with groceries, vacuum, maybe open a jar. I'm not casing the place, if that's what you're thinking." Helena leaned forward a fraction. "We're not accusing. We're asking who else might have seen that key. You or someone else. Someone who talked about it later. Someone who got curious." Kelvin's eyes flicked to Ruiz, then back. He looked genuinely confused. "Nobody. I didn't even know it was for their apartment. I don't go snooping in drawers." Ruiz exchanged a glance with Helena, but didn't push. The kid's tells were readable. Quick swallow when he didn't know something, steady gaze when he did. They wrapped it up a few minutes later with a card and a "call if you think of anything." "I don't love him for it," Ruiz said as they walked out into the thin afternoon sun. A bus sighed at the curb, a gust pushed dried leaves up the sidewalk like small animals changing their minds. "No," Helena agreed, "but I don't love him for it either." Somewhere between innocence and uselessness lay most of their interviews. They stopped by Holverson's again. He had made tea that went untouched on coasters shaped like autumn leaves. Still no key. Ruiz promised to keep the old man posted, and something in Holverson's shoulders dropped, relief mixed with a private embarrassment that his memory might have turned traitor. Back at the station, Helena found 2 detectives poring over Daniel's financials, faces lit blue by their monitors. One of them looked up as she entered, the way people do when they want to be the bearer of news that makes the room listen. "We might have something," she said. "Deleted," Helena repeated, more to hear how it sounded in the room. "Yeah, not just unused, wiped. But we pulled backup data from his cloud account. Last log trip was to a gas station 6 miles from here, in the middle of nowhere. No reason to go there, no receipts, no bank activity nearby." Helena frowned, the expression settling into her voice. "Maybe he met someone." "Maybe, but he didn't text or call anyone around the time of the ride, and his calendar just had a vague note, errand." "Who else knows?" "Just us. Haven't told the family yet. Thought you'd want to see it first." Helena pulled up the trip data, location, time, timestamp. It was almost 10 p.m., a school night for ordinary lives. Daniel had been out for 40 minutes. She ran through the timeline again. No forced entry, no sign of a struggle, nothing taken. A key might explain the access, but not the motive. Unless Daniel was meeting someone, and unless something had happened after that. The trouble with absence was how easily it wore any shape you gave it. She requested surveillance footage from the gas station, if any existed, then scrolled through his messages again. Still nothing. A life that read as a ledger. Grocery reminders, jokes with a coworker, a link to an article he didn't open. Later that evening, she walked back through the apartment, alone this time. The forensics team had cleared the scene. The rooms had that faint chemical brightness of recent cleaning. Quieter now, and somehow worse for it. Rooms should remember the people who move through them. This place felt like the ghost of a show apartment. Too neutral, too sanitized. On a shelf above the entryway sat a ceramic owl, decorative, hand-painted, a chipped wing that had been turned inward as if it had learned shame. Helena picked it up. Underneath was dust, but only in a half-moon shape, a little rind of grey where air hadn't reached. Something else had been sitting there before, recently moved. She put the owl back in the exact indentation it had made for itself and stood still. The house light hummed a thin electrical note. From somewhere outside came the soft hydraulics of the elevator. The apartment seemed to wait with her. And for a second, just a flicker, not a vision, not even a full thought, she felt something like a breath held too long. Like someone had been waiting. She let the feeling pass, then wrote only what she could defend. Missing box, half-moon dust, drag line by shelf, ask family, ask when last moved. Sometimes the body could know before the mind permitted language. The work was teaching them to meet in the middle. Chapter 5. The Face That Doesn't Fit. The gas station was one of those 24-hour places with more cameras than staff, fluorescent lights bleaching the night to the color of milk. The owner met them in a stained T-shirt, a man jittery from too much coffee and the permanent surprise of midnight economy. "You're lucky," he said, already proud of his system. "Overwrites every 10 days. You just made the cut." They stood in the cramped back office while he queued up the footage. The air smelled of cardboard and old toner. Helena watched the timestamp tick forward. 9:48 p.m., 2 weeks ago. A silver hatchback slid into the lot and idled like a patient dog. "That's the rideshare vehicle," Ruiz said. Daniel stepped out, alone, wearing a grey jacket and carrying nothing. He looked around, checked his phone with the distracted tap-tap of habit, then walked towards the edge of the lot where the light fell off into shadow. "Where's he going?" Helena asked. "The other side of the building has another cam. Hold on," the owner said. He clicked through a few windows, fingers fast from practice, then pointed. There, Daniel again, stopping just before the corner. Someone stepped into frame. A man, hood up, face angled down. He stood too straight for a slouch, too loosely for a cop. The image wasn't clear, low resolution, shadowed, but Helena leaned in anyway, habit making hope out of pixels. The man didn't touch Daniel. They didn't shake hands, just stood for a moment, the body language of strangers cooperating at arm's length. Then Daniel turned back towards the car. "Short meeting," Ruiz muttered. "Not a friend," Helena said. "Not a fight either." The owner's gas station shrugged. "We don't get many regulars who come out here just to talk." "Can you export this frame?" He nodded, already reaching for a thumb drive from a bowl full of other thumb drives, each one labelled with masking tape like they were pets with temporary names. They left with the flash drive, and more questions than answers. Back at the station, facial recognition came up empty. No hits. The program shrugged in code. "Maybe it's nothing," Ruiz said, staring at the blurred figure on the screen. A stranger, someone Daniel thought was someone else. Maybe, Helena said, but her tone said otherwise. Even nothing had a shape. Ruiz changed the subject the way detectives do when a dead end is still too warm to throw out. Still nothing from Kelvin. Says he's willing to take a polygraph. Doesn't want to lose the Holverson job. Did the key turn up yet? Ruiz shook his head. Not at the apartment, not at the office. Holverson's half convinced he returned it and just forgot. Helena tapped the printed photo again. The man in the hood, a smudge arranged like a decision. Something about him feels off. Gut. Not just that.
Later that evening, she walked the apartment again, the way you retrace a sentence to hear what you missed the first time. She carried a printed copy of the evidence log and moved room to room, letting her eyes go soft, then sharp. Bedroom, check. Closet, check. Kitchen, check. Living room. She stopped. Above the entryway shelf sat the ceramic owl, but beside it, something was missing. Not in a forensic sense. No broken glass, no pry marks, no obvious void on the inventory. Just space where settled dust said there should be an object. That half-moon rind again, the afterimage of presence. She crouched, studied the shelf, looked through the photos from the original crime scene on her phone, thumb sliding past images too clean to be true. In one of them, barely visible, almost incidental, there had been a box, rectangular, wooden. The kind of thing that holds small lives and makes them look like keepsakes. She zoomed in. The lid had been closed, but something was carved into the side. A wave pattern, or maybe flame, or maybe just a hand trying to make wood remember. She cross-checked the item list. No box listed. She looked again at the photo, then at the shelf, then at the list. The owl watched her like a witness who couldn't be trusted. Wasn't nothing, she said softly, and wrote it down in a margin where she kept the words she might have to defend. Omitted item, check with family, track. Not valuable, equals sentimental, equals motive for return. The apartment breathed its thin apartment breath. Helena stood, the thought moving from bone to language. The shelf told a different story. Chapter 6. Where It Shouldn't Be. Helena started with Leah's parents because missing things were often better described by the people who loved them. The living room was tidy in the way of a household that organized grief into lists. A small diffuser puffed lavender into the corners. Did Leah own a wooden box, about this big? She shaped the air with her hands, carved along the sides, something decorative. Leah's mother blinked as if bringing the object into focus, then nodded slowly. Yes, it was a gift. From Daniel, I think. She kept little things in it. Cards, ticket stumps, private stuff. Would she have taken it with her anywhere? No, it stayed on a shelf by the door. She said it was her reminder of good things. Why? It wasn't logged in the crime scene inventory, Helena said gently, and it's not in the apartment anymore. Her father spoke for the first time, voice gravelly and careful. Are you saying it was stolen? I'm saying it's missing, Helena answered, because sometimes the smallest word was safest. Ruiz met her back at the precinct. He looked irritated before he opened his mouth, a man who'd carried a sentence too long. Guess what turned up? Helena raised an eyebrow. The damn key. Halverson found it today, stuffed under the lining of a drawer in his entryway. Could Kelvin have done that?
He says no. Kelvin's schedule doesn't match. Halverson admits he didn't look there. Says he felt so bad about losing it, he might have skipped obvious places. So it was there all the time? Looks like it. Helena leaned back, chair creaking. Or someone wanted us to find it there. Ruiz stiffened. Now you're chasing ghosts. No, she said. Quiet. I'm accounting for people who want us looking in the wrong direction. He crossed his arms. You think someone planted the key to throw us off.
I think someone knew Halverson had it, and that we'd follow the thread. She didn't add, shame makes people misremember, and a good misdirection always borrows the voice of self-doubt. Ruiz didn't respond, but the pause said enough, the sound of a man filing his theory under possible and hating that it was. Helena returned to the man in the surveillance still. She printed the image, cropped it, and adjusted the shadows until the pixels looked like a decision. She stared until the blur yielded nothing new, and the paper felt heavier than it should. Later that evening, she met with Daniel's sister in a kitchen where a candle had been burning long enough to carve a well. Take a look at this, Helena said, sliding the photo across the table. Do you recognize him? She studied it, brow furrowed. Maybe. He looks like someone Daniel used to know. A guy from way back. They worked a job together years ago. I don't remember the name. Can you find out? I can try. It was before he moved here. A warehouse or factory job. Daniel didn't like to talk about that time. Said it was just a paycheck. She made a note she didn't trust yet. Let me know if anything comes back to you. She headed back to the apartment, not because she expected something new, but because the room had spoken and she hadn't fully heard it. Investigations were often that, a second listen. In the entryway, the shelf still held the owl. The space beside it sat empty in a way emptiness can feel full. Now she noticed something else, a faint drag mark along the wall, just behind the shelf. A thin line, almost polite, as if something had been pressed there, then lifted out with care. The shelf hadn't been dusted, the wall hadn't been cleaned, only one thing had been moved. She crouched and let her fingertips hover an inch from the paint, not touching it. A person could leave oils, a thought could leave a map. Whatever was in that box, someone wanted it badly enough to come back for it. The question was, why now? She wrote it exactly that way in her notebook, then underlined, now. The word looked both bigger and smaller than it should. Chapter 7. Things You Carry. Helena didn't want the building's history, just the unit, apartment 3B, the space where two people had died too quietly and too clean. The building manager had hesitated, then sent her a scan of the lease history. Only 5 tenants in 6 years. That said something too. Most names checked out. 1 had moved abroad, 1 had passed away. 2 more had clean records and stories that faded into new addresses. But Christopher Dunn was different. No active warrants, no convictions, but 2 flags. 1, a report of animal cruelty, dropped after a vague statement. A neighbor claimed to see a cat in Dunn's yard with what looked like burn marks. Dunn said it wasn't his cat, that someone else must have done that, and the case went nowhere. 2. A restraining order filed by a former co-worker after he reportedly followed her home twice and left cryptic notes. Dropped before the hearing.
It wasn't enough for anything, but it was enough. Rees skimmed the report. Creepy, but not illegal. No, Helena said, but it's off. I want to know where he went. A bit of digging turned up a parking ticket from 10 months ago, listed as the mailing address, a self-storage facility outside Clearwater. Unit 1117. The facility sat behind an abandoned strip mall, its sign half lit and flickering. The manager was friendly, in the detached way of someone who stopped being curious years ago. I don't think he's been around lately, he said. Pays online, never calls. They walked the row until they reached Unit 1117. Rees broke the seal, and the door rattled upward. Dust, dry air, a smell like old paper and something vaguely metallic. Inside, 4 labelled boxes, a coat rack with a single grey jacket, and a shelf clattered with oddities. One box read, Notes and Drafts. Another, Old Posters. The handwriting was small and tight. Helena opened the posters box first. Inside, a mix of black and white horror film posters, some vintage, some clearly copied. Several were cut or burned at the edges. Rees leaned over her shoulder. He's got a type. Helena didn't answer. She turned to the shelf. There, arranged like trophies, sat 6 objects. A rusted padlock, a disposable camera, a ceramic figurine with the face scratched off, a broken wristwatch, the glass spidered, a toy soldier melted halfway down. None of it was illegal. None of it meant anything, until it did. She opened the Notes and Drafts box. Journals, labelled by month and year. She flipped one open. Lists of items, snippets of phrases, a page of one-line entries that read more like impulses than prose. Hold your breath and it changes the sound. Control doesn't mean silence, but silence helps. A locked door is a frame, not a wall. Rees looked over. What is this? I don't know, but her stomach tightened. The tone was familiar. She'd seen it in reports, in people who tested the line before crossing it. She checked the bottom of the box. No photos, no maps, no keys, and no wooden box. She closed the lid carefully. Well? Rees asked. She stared around the unit once more. It's not enough. To charge him. To explain it. It's like he's rehearsing something, or remembering. What? She looked at the horror poster again. The woman bound, limp. The image had been handled often, thumbed, folded, retaped. I don't know, she murmured, but this doesn't feel like someone who moved on. Rees sighed. So we've got a guy who once lived in 3B, has a sketchy past, and keeps creepy memorabilia, but nothing that links him to Reyes and Tran. No, she touched the edge of the journal. But if this is how he sees the world, the apartment might have just been opportunity. They left without the click of certainty. No damning key, no missing box, no confession hiding in a drawer. But as Helena closed the door on Unit 1117 and heard the padlock click, she felt it again. That pause in the world, the breath before. Something's wrong, she said softly. Rees raised a brow. What? She shook her head. I just can't prove what yet. Chapter 8. The People Who Keep Doors. They found Gordon Vance, the landlord, outside the building, adjusting a bent mailbox hinge with a flathead screwdriver and a cigarette tucked behind his ear. He straightened when he saw them, wiping his palms on his jeans. "Back again?" "Follow up," Helena said, "about one of your former tenants." His expression shifted, guarded but not surprised. "Which one?" "Christopher Dunn, Unit 3B, lived here about 6 years ago." Vance nodded slowly, gaze drifting toward the third-floor windows. "I remember him. Quiet, bit intense, never complained, moved out on time." Helena stepped in. "Did you change the lock after he left?" Vance blinked. Not long, but long enough. "No reason to. He turned the keys in at checkout. Left the place cleaner than most." "So you kept the same cylinder?" "For a while, yeah. We only rekey if there's a problem." Helena didn't move. "Could he have made a copy?" "I guess anyone could if they wanted, but we don't give them time. We collect the keys in person." "But you don't verify they haven't duplicated them?" "It's not standard practice. Most people aren't thinking like that. They just want their deposit back." "Dunn didn't contest anything when he moved out?" "Nope. Clean break? I remember because it was easy." "Any reason he'd want to come back?" Ruiz asked. Vance scratched the back of his neck. "He asked once, about a month after moving out, if the unit had been re-rented yet. Said he left something behind. But when I offered to let him in, he said never mind." Helena raised an eyebrow. "Did that seem strange at the time?" "I mean, maybe a little, but people flake. He wasn't aggressive. Just off. But not in a way that set off alarms." "Do you remember what he said he left behind?" she asked. "No. He didn't say." She let the silence stretch, watching him fill it with his own discomfort. His eyes kept flicking toward the door, like he had somewhere else to be. "You've had 5 tenants in 3B since Dunn, and you're certain the lock was never changed after he moved out?" "Not unless someone requested it, and none of those tenants did." "So the key he returned might have been copied, or he never returned all of them." Vance didn't answer, which was answer enough. "We'll also need full contact info for every contractor, cleaner, or vendor who's been inside that unit in the past 6 years. Even the real estate photographer, if you remember who that was." "I'll dig it up," he said, already deflating. They left him by the mailbox, screwdriver dangling from his hand. Downstairs, Helena paused at the entrance to the building's mailroom. The brass mailbox, labeled 3B, had a faint scratch above the lock, as if someone had missed with a key. She ran a fingertip over the mark. Ruiz stood beside her. "So what are we saying? That Dunn held on to a key for 6 years, waiting for a random couple to move in?" "No," Helena said. "We're saying someone who'd already imagined the crime found the right place for it." Ruiz frowned. "We don't have proof it was him." Yet. He waited, then said, "You believe it was?" She didn't answer. She was still staring at the mailbox, at the dent in the frame. A tiny distortion, like pressure had once leaned there, subtle, sustained. "I believe someone knew exactly how to get in, and didn't care who they found inside." Chapter 9. The Pattern You Missed. It took 2 days to find him. Christopher Dunn's name didn't return much. No credit activity, no utility bills, no lease records. But the parking ticket that led to the storage unit had included a vehicle, a dull silver Honda Civic, 10 years old, unremarkable, registered to an address that no longer existed. Helena flagged the license plate with traffic surveillance. On the third morning, it pinged. A neighborhood in South Point, residential, quiet. They went without uniforms. Ruiz drove. The Civic was parked at the far end of a narrow street lined with duplexes, all carbon copies of each other, beige vinyl siding, mismatched blinds, cracked concrete steps. Dunn's car was tucked neatly at the curb. Clean. Nothing in the windows. They waited. At 8:12 a.m. he came out. He wore a dark windbreaker, hood up, carried a bag, locked the door behind him. His gait was unhurried, not casual but contained, like someone who'd timed the route down to the footfall. Ruiz snapped a photo. "Should we talk to him?" "Not yet," Helena said. "I want to know where he goes when no one's watching." They followed from 3 car lengths back. Dunn didn't look over his shoulder once. He walked to the bus stop, waited, boarded the number 12, paid cash. No interaction. At Midtown, he got off, walked a block and a half, entered a public library. Helena and Ruiz stayed outside at first. 10 minutes passed. She went in. The building was quiet. Afternoon light filtered through high windows, a few students with laptops, an elderly man asleep near the local history shelves. Dunn sat at a computer terminal, back straight. His screen displayed a document. No email, no browser. He was typing, steadily. His fingers never paused. After 30 minutes, he printed a page, folded it, and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Helena moved to intercept him by the front door. But he never exited. He'd gone out the back. Ruiz was already circling the building. "Gone," he said into the phone. "Must have known." Helena stared across the street. No bus stop, no taxis, no security footage they'd be able to get fast. "He saw us." Ruiz swore under his breath. "So now what?" "We find out what he's printing." It took a warrant. 48 hours later, the library logs came in. Dunn hadn't logged in to any accounts. He used the guest option, but the print queue showed 5 documents in the past month, each titled only by date. We recovered one from the buffer. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. 1. Entry, exit, 3 points of failure. 2. Soundproofing limits. 3. Time to silence estimate is under 60 seconds. 4. Blinds down, good. 5. No pets, confirm. 6. Return route clear, midday best. "Is this a journal?" Ruiz asked, eyebrows drawn tight. "No," Helena said, her voice flat. It's a rehearsal. That night, she returned to the apartment building alone. She didn't go inside. She stood across the street and watched the third-floor windows. Most were dark. The light in 3B was off. The unit remained sealed. But she pictured Dunn standing at the corner, as he must have, at some point, watching, planning. Helena closed her eyes. The list repeated behind her eyelids. Time to silence. 3 points of failure. Blinds down equals good. She didn't need a confession. She needed to catch him before he wrote the last item. Chapter 10. The Silence That Follows. They brought him in on a pretext. Nothing serious. A traffic violation, flagged plates, a discrepancy in the DMV records. Enough to hold him for an hour. Helena waited across the table while Dunn sat still, hands folded, expression unreadable. He wore the same windbreaker from the library, zipped halfway. No visible tension, no visible guilt. She didn't open a file, didn't lead with questions. You lived in Unit 3B. He didn't blink. Years ago. You turned in your keys. That's what they asked for. But you didn't change. You still watched the building. I passed by. Sometimes. Why? He tilted his head slightly, as if the question was too simple. You don't forget the shape of a place. She leaned forward. You printed lists, exit points, timelines, details about an apartment you hadn't lived in for 6 years. I write things, he said calmly. Always have. What were you rehearsing? A pause, then a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Maybe I was imagining how I'd protect myself if something ever happened. No. You weren't planning how to survive. You were planning how to enter, how to stay quiet, how to leave. Still, he didn't flinch. You think I did something. I know you did. You can't prove it. No, she said. Not yet. The silence thickened. She watched him, his breathing, his micro-movements, his unblinking calm, not arrogance. Precision. You came back because you wanted it to be perfect, not messy, not random, controlled. You don't like chaos. You like stillness. His jaw flexed. Barely. You didn't kill them because of who they were. You killed them because they were nothing to you. That's why it worked. That's why you chose them. Still no confession. But no denial either. He looked down at his hands, picked at a hangnail. What happens now? Helena's voice remained even. We build the rest. Slowly, carefully. The pattern's already there. He sat back in his chair. You'll waste time. Only until you slip again. She stood, gathered nothing, left him with his stillness. Outside, Ruiz waited by the window. Nothing? He asked. Plenty, she said. Nothing we can charge him with, yet. Ruiz shook his head. He's ice, like it's not even real to him. It is, but only in the planning, not the consequence. They walked to the end of the hall. You think he'll do it again? She stopped, turned to face the glass. I think he already was. Inside the interview room, Dunn sat alone, still. The room was quiet, fluorescent lights buzzing softly. He looked at the mirror, not into it, through it. Then, just above a whisper, to no one. She was supposed to be asleep. He blinked slowly. No reaction, no regret, just the precision of a man reviewing a step that hadn't gone to plan.
2 months later, it happened again. Almost. Different city, similar building, another couple. Only this time, the door creaked louder than he expected, and the woman wasn't asleep. She screamed. Neighbors called 911. He ran. They caught him in a parking garage 2 blocks away. No keys on him, but in his pocket, a folded sheet of paper, 3 addresses, 1 hand-drawn floor plan, and the same phrase at the top of the page: time to silence estimate, under 60 seconds. Helena read the report alone in her apartment. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She just circled the timestamp, 10:43 p.m., and wrote next to it, "It was never random."
End of story. If you enjoyed this mystery, don't forget to like, subscribe, and listen to more full-length cases from the Helena Monroe series.